Hi, everyone. Thank you for coming to the CA booth today to watch this lightning talk. My name is Hazor. I'm a product manager at Runscope. And today I'm going to be talking to you about how you can increase trust in your APIs by using an API monitoring solution. And how you can do that not only for monitoring production APIs, but really monitor production, staging, testing, local environments. So really monitor APIs across the whole development lifecycle, right? So with that being said, I'm just going to jump right into the live demo. So here we have the Runscope Dashboard. So this is the main interface that you would see if you sign into your Runscope account or if you sign up for a free trial. You can see here I have a couple API monitors that are already created and are already running. But for this demo, we're going to start by creating a new test. Okay, so I'm going to click on Create Test here, New Test. Can everybody see font? Good? Okay. So Create Test, I'm going to name this Deck of Cards. Click Create Test again. Okay. So what you're going to see now is the editor interface for Runscope, and this is where you really do all the work. So create the requests that you want to test, the endpoints, set up headers, authentication, etc. I named this monitor Deck of Cards because that's the API we're going to be using. I figured since we're in Vegas, this is a good API for me to demo. The Deck of Cards API is a public API. It's free. Anyone can use it. You can just go to deckofcardsapi.com. And it basically simulates handling a deck of cards, right? So I can use an endpoint to get a new deck of cards, shuffle those cards, draw cards, create a pile, et cetera, et cetera. So for the first endpoint we're going to monitor, we're going to copy the shuffle the cards. And I'm just going to copy, paste it here. And it's a GET request. So I can just save and run this and make sure that the API is working and the Wi-Fi is working as well. OK, so on the left-hand side, you can see here the test run just passed. So we know that the API is up, right? So this is great. API is up. But when we're talking about API monitoring, we really want to focus on three different things. So the first one is uptime, right? And we got that covered right now. The second thing is performance, right? If our API is taking 10 seconds, 20 seconds to return, that's probably not great, right? So we want to make sure the API is returning in a good response time. The third thing is data validation. We're going to make sure the API is returning the correct data, the data that we expect, and that it's not going to break any integrations with internal systems or other partners. So we can do that inside of Runscope by going to assertions. And you can see here I have already one assertion created for status code. It's checking if it's equal to 200. And I'm going to create another assertion here. This one's going to be response time. And I'm going to do this less than 500 milliseconds, right? So let's say this is the threshold for me for this API. This is what I think is a good performance for it. And now I can add another assertion. And this time I'm going to do JSON body. If we open here, if we click on last response data, we can actually see the response from the request that I just ran. So you can see here the status code was 200, response time. We have some headers, and we have the JSON body that return. So we have this property here remaining, which is 52, which is the number of cards in the deck, right? So I want to make sure this is always 52, right? We don't want someone changing the API, adding some jokers to our deck of cards, and then messing up our whole system because of it. So now I can save and run this again. On the left side, you can see there's a new test run. I can click it, and you can see our result passed, and all our assertions are also passing, right? So this is a great start for API monitoring. But in a real-world use case, let's say we have an e-commerce application, right? We may have hundreds of endpoints. It's really unlikely that we're going to be testing each endpoint individually, right? It's more likely that we're going to have some workflows. Maybe want to create a user, make sure the user can add an item to the shopping cart, check out, and then sign out, right? So we have like 4 different requests. Want to make sure they're all working. And we can do that inside of Runscope as well. We can chain requests together and really test a workflow, not just a single endpoint. So I can go back to the editor now. And I'm just going to duplicate the first step that we just created. And for the next endpoint we're going to use is going to be the draw card endpoint. And I can just copy this, paste it. And you can see here this endpoint actually has a variable. It's the deck ID. The deck ID is something that's going to be returning to us from the JSON body from the first request, right? So we want to save this into a variable, pass that into our second request, and then we're good to go. So I can do that by going to the variables tab next to the assertions, add a variable. I can choose the source for the variable. This, in our case, is a JSON body, but it could be an XML body, headers, etc. So JSON body, the property name is deck ID. I'm going to name it inside of Runscope as deck ID as well. Make it easy. And as soon as I do that, you can see here on my second request, available variables is already there. I can use it. So I can just delete this, click on the variable, and we're done. So now in the next test run, Runscope is going to get the variable from the first request, replace it in the second request, and then we should be drawing the cards from the deck. Now, before I run this, I'm going to make sure the assertions are right. So status code is probably going to be 200. Response time, we're going to keep it 500. The remaining property is probably not going to be 52 anymore since we're drawing cards. So we're drawing 2 cards. This is probably going to be 50, right? So I can save and run now. We can go to our test run. We can see that the first request passed, and the second request is also working, right? So this is really good. We got an API monitor set up. We are testing uptime. We're testing performance. We're testing data validation. But right now, I'm running all this tests by clicking the Run Now button, right? Which is really not ideal. Like, if we really want to monitor something, we want to make sure this is automatic. So I can do that by going to the schedules on the left-hand side, adding a schedule, and then, oops, add a 2. And then I can run this test every minute, every 5 minutes, every hour. Depends on what kind of API you're testing. I'm just going to leave it every minute here. Save. And then we're good to go. So now, to just wrap this up, we got schedules we're testing, the 3 pillars that I mentioned before. But what happens if the API fails, right? This is the most important part. If something fails, we want to be the first ones to know that our API is failing, right? We don't want our customers to be opening support tickets with us, and then we're like, oh, like something went wrong. We need to fix this. So to do that, we were on the steps part of the API monitor editor. And you can see here on the top part, we have environment, and we have environment settings. So I can click here and spin our environment settings. I have quite a few options here for environments. And I'm just going to focus on 2 of them. So the first one would be email notifications. So I can get an email in my account here, aitor@runscope.com. I can just check the checkbox here. Then I can get an email whenever a test run is completed, or just when it fails, which is not more likely to be true, or maybe when it fails in a location a couple of times. So this is good, but just notifying myself is probably not great. We're probably part of a team, right? So we want to actually look into integrations. So Runscope has integrations with a lot of third-party services. For my account here, you can see I have a Slack integration set up. And I can just toggle this on. And then all test run messages are going to be sent to the Slack channel. And I can just save this. And then we should be good to go. And if we click here on Add Integrations, you can see we have a lot of other things. We have Datadog, Splunk Cloud, PagerDuty, all companies that are around here. We have integration with AWS API Gateway. Some other chat apps, Microsoft Teams and HipChat. And we even have webhooks. So if you want to customize your own integration, you can just use our webhooks, and then you can do whatever you want with the raw data from the results, right? So I'm almost done. Just want to show one last thing. I mentioned in the beginning of the talk that you can use API monitors to monitor API not only in production, right? But also during testing, during local development. So if I go back, I have another test that I had set up previously, Shuffle Cards Plus. And if I go to the editor here, I gave a really quick glimpse of what the environment can do with email notifications and integrations. But the environment really has a lot of other things. One of the things that the environment has is locations. So you can run your API monitors from 16 different locations across the world. So you can make sure that your API is working well, is performing well, not only in the US, but really across the whole world. And make sure that if you have a lot of customers in London, for example, you're running your API monitors from that location, make sure that they have a good thing. I also have a 7th location here, which is called Aitor WorkMac. So Runscope has an on-premise agent, which I can use. I can install in my machine, and then I can run the same API monitors from production when I'm developing. And the on-premise agent is also great if you have private APIs. You know, if you have enterprise, if you're an enterprise customer, you have private APIs, you have something behind a firewall, you can install the agent and also run those monitors there. So that's my demo.